Hello everybody, Justin Dunaway here with the Institute of Clinical Excellence, and today I want to talk to you about what it is to be an evidence-based practitioner in the age of uncertainty. And by that I mean when we dive into the research and try to really build out our foundation for evidence-based practice, there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of contraindications in the research. And then when you look at experts talking about research, they can't seem to agree on what's best practice either. So it's hard to be as a clinician. It's definitely a difficult task to be an evidence-based physical therapist. So when we look at what it means to be evidence-based, we're talking about the three pillars of evidence-based medicine, which is a combination of the best available research, clinical experience, and patients' values and expectations. And some combination of those three things is what defines evidence-based practice. Now, there's even a lot of debate into how that works and how these things are weighted. Are these things all equal pillars? Are they three legs of the same stool, or is it more of a pyramid or an inverted pyramid where best available research is the foundation, and only within that can our clinical experience come from? And then at the end of that, the smallest piece of that pyramid, or maybe the least valuable, are the patient's values and expectations. Kind of a common thought when we think about this, or one that's popular among clinicians, is this idea that the best available research, the RCTs, the randomized controlled trials with the meta-analysis, the Cochrane reviews, these are the things that should guide our practice. And then within those bounds, that's where we get to use our clinical expertise and then patients' values and expectations. So when we think about how research is conducted, our blinded, double-blinded controlled trials and our systematic reviews and all that, when we talk about a blinded controlled trial, what we're really talking about is taking an intervention and then taking a placebo intervention, an intervention that looks and feels similar to the original intervention, and comparing those two things as a way to control for expectations. So we give two people what they believe is the same intervention, and then you take your effects from the placebo and subtract it from your effects from the actual active intervention, and then what's left over is your treatment effect. What kind of drives this idea is we're trying to control for expectation. And expectation can be incredibly powerful. There's a really interesting study. There's lots of really great expectation studies, but this is a really kind of powerful one in my mind. It's the effect of treatment expectation on drug efficacy, imaging the analgesic benefit of the opioid remfentanil. Right? And this is a pretty powerful opioid, and it's got a very quick onset and a very quick offset. So it's a valuable tool in research. And they took asymptomatic subjects and experimentally induced the same level of heat, nociceptive input. So everybody had the same stimulus, created a painful experience. And then they were divided into three groups, and everybody got the same dose of the remfentanil, but it was under three conditions. You either got the remfentanil and they said, hey, listen, this is a really powerful opioid and it's going to make you feel so much less pain that you'll barely be able to feel this heat stimulus. And then the second group, they didn't get any expectation coaching at all. They just said, hey, here's your opioid, and then here's your painful heat. And then the third group said, hey, you're going to take this opioid, and it's actually going to make this painful stimulus significantly more painful. So you had a positive, a neutral, and a negative expectation group. And what they found was the positive expectation group doubled the efficacy of the opioid, and the negative expectation group completely wiped out the effect of the opioid. It canceled the opioid. They didn't have any pain relief whatsoever. This is incredible that just a mere verbal suggestion can shut off the effect of exogenous opioid, a powerful one. So it's incredible. When you think about that, when you think about how powerful expectation can be in research, it can start to give us a little bit of clue as to why some of our research is so varied. Now, when we conduct interventional trials, we try to control for expectation. But it would be pretty interesting when you do a research trial and you give people either they read the they read the information about the study that they're in, and they know they're either going to be in a treatment arm or a placebo arm. And a lot of our treatments, it's hard to mask that placebo. It's hard to let you know that you're actually not getting a treatment. Or it's hard to mask the placebo. So if you were to ask patients at the end of the study, do you believe that you actually got the treatment or you got the placebo? Depending on what they believed, they would probably have a belief of expectation. If they believed they got the placebo, they probably didn't believe that it was going to be very effective. Or if they got the placebo but thought they got the treatment, then they believed that it was very effective. You could see how that could change your results a little bit if you're actually not measuring patients' beliefs after the study. How about going into the study? What about if a patient believes in the treatment they're about to get? What if this is a study on on exercises with a physio ball, and you had a physio ball pop on you once and you think they were silly. So going into the study, you had a very strong negative belief about physio balls, or a very strong positive. You can see how beliefs can change our results independent of the actual intervention. And Bishop's research team has done some really great research into patients' beliefs and expectations and how they affect the outcomes of a trial. In one study, he looked at beliefs around patients with neck pain, what treatments that they believed that they needed for their neck pain, if they believed any treatment would help them. The first thing they found is, independent of any of the interventions, if you believed that your treatment, your physical therapy sessions were going to make you better, those patients outperformed patients that didn't believe their course of care was going to be helpful. The second thing that was very interesting is if you believed that you needed a manipulation for your neck pain but didn't receive it, you had significantly less chances of success than patients that didn't believe they needed it and didn't get it. And the converse of that is true too. If you didn't believe the treatment would be effective and you got it anyway, you had way less chance of actually having a successful outcome. So what we see here is that patients' beliefs about a specific treatment really play into the effects of the treatment, regardless of actual active treatment or placebo. So you can see how that can mess with some of the outcomes in a treatment trial as well. Another really interesting research team, Cleland and Learman, looking at clinicians' beliefs and expectations and outcomes. And one of the studies they did looked at manipulation versus mobilization for patients with neck pain. And what they found is, when you look at the aggregate of the study, big multi-center trial, manipulation, mobilization, pretty much the same thing. But they also measured clinician equipoise, which just basically means that that clinicians, do you believe that the manipulation is more effective than mobilization, or the mobilization will be more effective than the manipulation? And then they performed the trial, and what they found is that the clinicians that believed manipulation was more effective than mobilization, their manipulation patients outperformed the mobilization patients. And then the clinicians that believed the mobilization was more effective than the manipulation, their mobilization patients outperformed the manipulation patients. So what we know is expectation is very, very important. And patients' expectations and beliefs will change the results of the trial. And we know that the clinicians' beliefs and expectations will also change the effects of the trial. So where that brings us is here. It's the water's pretty murky. And for every trial that we find that supports a thing that we think might be necessary, we can find a couple trials that say the exact opposite, that say it's ineffective. And then we can find a systematic review that says when you compare everything, it's no better than placebo, or it's no better than other treatments, or it all pretty much levels out to be the same. And then when we get to the meta-analysis level, what does that tell us? Typically it says that it's inconclusive and we need more research. And then when you get to the Cochrane review, when you get to the top of the placebo, or when you get to the top of the research pyramid, when you get to the level, the highest level of research, what do we find at the end of almost all Cochrane reviews? Well, it ends like this. Due to the heterogeneity of studies, the lack of well-done controls, and the high risk of bias, more research is needed before a conclusion can be determined. All right? And if any of you caught this this really interesting study that just came out early this year, it's a conclusiveness study. And it's called the Conclusiveness of Cochrane Reviews in Physiotherapy, a systematic search and analytical review. And basically what this study does is it goes into the Cochrane reviews and pulls out every study that has to do with physical therapy, and then just looks to see, did this end in a definitive conclusion or was it inconclusive? And what they found was 283 Cochrane reviews in the field of physical therapy, and of those, only 16, that's 5.7%, only 5.7% of our evidence base in the Cochrane reviews had a conclusive conclusive finding. Right? And just to kind of put that number in perspective, when you look at conclusiveness reviews in other professions, in the field of nutrition, they're about 64% conclusive. In pediatric gastroenterology, 80%. Neonatal reviews, 67%. Eye and vision, 52%. Gynecological cancer, 62%. So we don't seem to stack up very well in our evidence base compared to some other professions and specialty areas. And then when we look at those 16 studies, the 16 studies that were conclusive, only six of them relate to orthopedics, right? And those 6 studies were exercise for intermittent claudication, interventions for fall prevention in the elderly, interventions for the treatment of proximal humerus fractures, interventions for improved adherence to exercise in chronic musculoskeletal pain, manual therapy and exercise for rotator cuff disease, and exercise for knee arthritis. And guys, guess what? Exercise for knee arthritis, it was good. But what I want you to see with this is that of our 5.7%, of our 16 studies, only 6 of them relate to orthopedics, and none of them are about back pain, which is the #1 cause of disability worldwide. None of them are about manipulation or mobilization or loading or specific exercises versus general exercises. None of them talk about posture. None of them are about movement screens or injury prevention. None of them are about dry needling. None of them are about any of the stuff that we fight about day in and day out. None of them are about any of the things that we use as the foundational pillars to define us as evidence-based or not evidence-based. What I want you guys to realize here is that it doesn't mean that the research is useless, that it serves no purpose, that it shouldn't be in evidence-based medicine. What this tells us is that we still have a lot to learn. Tons, in fact. It tells us that we've got to really look at how we conduct research. We need to improve our methods. We have to reconcile how we think and deal with expectations. Should we be looking at patient expectations going into a study? Should we be looking at patients' knowledge or expectations, whether they were in the placebo arm or in the treatment arm? Should we be measuring clinicians' beliefs, expectations, equipost, pre and post every study? We need to figure out ways to, instead of trying to make clinical practice look like interventional studies devoid of context, but figure out how we can make research look more like clinical practice. And then develop our field of research there. And I think kind of where we're at now is that just what the conclusiveness review said is that where we're at now is we need more research. We just don't know yet. I think Jeff Moore says it best when he says, the problem is I can't tell my 9 a.m. patient, sorry, John, more research is needed. And I think that really kind of strikes at the heart of where we're at. We've got a ton of research, but it doesn't seem to tell us a whole lot definitively which way to go. But what we do know, right? Childs and Julie Fritz have some great lines of research that say, when you look at physical therapy on a whole, when you look at early access to physical therapy is very, very effective for a lot of things. It reduces cost of care. It gets patients out of the medical system. It reduces imaging. It reduces opioids. It improves pain and disability. Physical therapy works. We're just not very good at understanding what individual pieces or why it works yet. So with all of that information, how do we know what works, and how do we translate this into the clinic? How do we take all of this knowledge and be evidence-based clinicians? Well, to me, I think what we need to do is we definitely need to read the research. I don't want you to hear this and think that Justin is anti-research. I read a ton of research. I love reading papers. It's very important to how I think about and practice and as a clinician. So we need to read the research. We've got to see what's out there. We need to generate a bank of ideas, see what people are trying in trials, and think that these are things that have some value in the clinic, and there are some patients that this is going to be incredibly valuable for. So generate a bank of ideas to try with our patients. We need to develop a focused and reflective practice to help us guide how we package these treatments. We need to, as we treat our patients, we need to make sure that we have really good subjective and objective comparable measures, making sure that we're always checking in on these to make sure that our patients are moving forward. And when they are, we need to step back and really get that in our head is what pattern, what was it about that patient that made that treatment effective? And when those needles don't move, that is an indication for us to step back and switch gears and take a different approach. We need to make sure that we are engaging our patients and diving deep, learning their values, learning their beliefs, learning their expectations, and be willing to meet the patients where they are met or where they need to be met and work with them to drive them forward along this path to an independent and healthier lifestyle. With all this information, we got to create a package, one that's tailored to the needs and the beliefs of the individual patient in front of us, and guided by our comparable signs with the ability to shift approaches when the needle isn't moving. So at the end of the day, to me, evidence-based practice, it basically means this. It means that what we know from the research is that there are no clear-cut answers. We have no algorithm yet, nothing that gives us an answer for every patient through the door, and it doesn't seem like there's going to be one on the horizon. So we need to read the research. We need to know what's out there. We need to be inquisitive. We need to be agile. We need to meet the patients where they are and tailor our care to them and always work to drive the needle forward. Finding ways to engage the patients where they are, that's the key to everything. And then taking that, getting alongside them, coming alongside your patients and driving them forward, doing everything we can to move the patient from a position of them being in our office, looking for care, to being independent, healthy, active, and not needing the system. That's the goal. All right, I hope you guys found this helpful. As always, have a great day, and thanks for listening.